Welcome to Classic Mistake, the podcast that celebrates the more human side of classical music, in other words, fails. I'm Sara Hahn-Scinocco, the host for this episode, featuring many different Canadian flute players. We all took part in an initiative put on by my colleague Gwen Klassen called Flute Tapestry. Essentially, the goal of our little Zoom meeting was to discuss mistake stories, fail stories, and how they're just a part of life for all musicians. And how instead of letting those moments ruin our self-esteem, how we can use them to fuel wellness and laughter and joy. There's a link in the show notes to the Flute Tapestry website, as well as the names of all the participants.
Marvin Hamlish. And he was doing his shtick, like very, very quick-witted. It was very funny. And then he turned to me and he said, "Play Stars and Stripes." And it's like, "I'm not American," I said to him. "I don't know it." And he said, "Well, just anything." And I went, and that was it. And, it was very, very embarrassing. And that one I haven't compartmentalized to such a degree that I can still think about it and laugh about it. So that was, that Marvin Hamlish, that was a classic. I had a lot of people being very empathetic afterwards. "Oh, I can't imagine being put on the spot like that." And I was like, that was so kind. So then it also allowed me not to be hideously embarrassed. Like, that kindness allowed me to find the humor in it too.
It's similar, but a little bit different. We contracted out for Video Games Live, which is, I guess it's a group that comes up with a rock band and a conductor, and the orchestra plays the background music to large video game screens behind us. And it was my very first time using a click track. So wasn't used to that. So not, conductor doing pretty much nothing. You had the click track keeping you on, and there's this, it went completely fine in the rehearsal. And then we get to the Legend of Zelda. And all of a sudden I'm hearing the click track and I'm counting and everything's great. And all of a sudden this voice comes on and says, "Flute solo in 5, 4, just threw me." I went, what is that? And I lost count because it was of the warning. So he sang the first 2 notes into my headphones, and then I took off from there. But it was so embarrassing. I just was so not expecting a voice to suddenly come through headphones and talk at me. It was quite funny. Anyway.
Why would they even have that in there? I don't
know. I was counting fine, but it was just something I'd never experienced. So it just made me jump. So.
Reminds me of the Esther Honens, when I don't know how many years ago this was, and it was being televised, and I was like a little bit sick, and I had been like this kind of sick before, and it goes away, especially if I take certain meds, but it was not going away. And so like there was no way I could play. And I won't go into details of what I had set up around me to try and compensate for the illness, but it was very clear this was not going to end anytime soon. And so it was like the walk of shame off the stage, and like so many phone calls. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Because it was televised as well. So it was quite dramatic. But again, I got that empathy. So that was, I can't imagine playing with what was going on, because that person was right beside me. But it's a whole new world now. I don't know if we would have to gut it through like that anymore. That it would just be like, just stay home, Gwen.
We were playing the Saint-Saëns, the carnival, and in the middle of the quietest moment, my tuner fell off my music stand, and everyone on stage was terribly distracted, looking who dropped their instrument. Everybody's panicking, thinking part of their instrument may have fallen, or some of their equipment, and the audience went and so it was so unfortunate, and I just pretended like nothing happened. There was nothing else I could do, because I didn't want to call attention to myself, and I would like beat red, but I was just like, I'm not looking at anybody, I'm not looking at my tuner on the floor, nothing. So yeah. And we've had these education outreaches as well, and we had an interesting inter-orchestral feud, I guess you can call it, where we did one show in the morning and one show in the afternoon. And in the morning, we were put on the spot, and I've learned a couple of things from those things. Is one, always warn people about the piccolo, how high it is, because these poor kids, if they're not warned about the sound, they actually, some start crying. So I always tell people, all right, get your hands up, cover your ears, because it's going to be very, very loud. And I give them a good warning, because that's being like, it's heartbreaking when a child starts crying from something you've demonstrated to them. But this feud that happened is, we all just off the cuff do our little presentation and whatever we feel like doing at the time. And we had the first show, the brass did a Star Wars excerpt. And the second show, the strings went first, and the violas took the brass's part and played that. And then the brass were left hanging. They had prepared this as a group, and then they had to scramble on the spot. So that was interesting.
To me, one of the funniest things, for me, it's just so funny when somebody plays in a rest, like, a grand pause, or like nobody's supposed to be playing. It literally happens to everybody at some point in time, and it's just so funny. Like, it feels terrible when it's you, but if someone else does it, it's like, oh good, they did it, it wasn't me. But in our orchestra, often, like one of the violinists recently did it, and she just stood up and took a bow, after, like, yep, thank you very much. That was me. Yeah. Does anyone have any stories about putting their foot in their flute?
Many, many times. And what I have found also in our orchestra is that then when we do it again, someone else will do it on purpose. We'll step in the hole on purpose. So again, it lightens the mood a little bit. And I'm sure there are people who feel differently about this, but for me, it doesn't take away with our commitment to excellence. It just takes like that. The inner critic, that harsh judge, just takes a breather, because that can spread like wildfire too. And I think we're made that way, to pay attention to the negative, that the negative feels more real than the positive. And so if we can keep creating that environment where humor is a valid way of releasing some of that pressure, then I think it remains much more healthy overall. And we maintain that healthy competition within. So like, not only are we listening so carefully, we know when each other has made a mistake, but we're also like attuned to the musical flow and the musical intuition and ideas that are being bounced around as well. What I've noticed is those things are quite woven together in sort of like a tapestry type of way.
So I probably wasn't able to laugh about it until recently. And so you gave me the directive to find something funny. And I mentioned this to my husband today, and he says, oh, are you going to tell them about it? And I said, yes, I will tell them. So 21 years ago, I had a 1-year-old, and I was just sort of getting back into playing again. And I was carrying him, and I tripped and I broke my foot. So with, this 35-pound bag of potatoes in my hand. Anyway, with the Canadian medical system and so on, when I went to emerge, they didn't cast it properly because they were going to do surgery, or they thought they were. So I had a half cast on the break, and I had a concert that weekend, and I had just recently been asked to play principal in the Ottawa Chamber Orchestra, which my husband was conducting. And my husband's at the time, he was a violinist in the NAC. He's now been playing viola at 17 years, I guess. And he hadn't asked me to play, so it wasn't like a nepotism kind of thing, but he felt a little bit on the spot with me playing. And on the program was Heberty's Overture, which I love. And because of my foot thing, I had my foot elevated, the broken foot elevated. So I wasn't in a really great flute playing position. And for some inexplicable reason, when the key change happened, I played an A natural instead of an A flat. And I mean, this is a big flute solo, and I was playing big. And I knew they played it just fine in rehearsals. Like, I don't know what happened, but you know, the times when you just want to sink under your chair and yeah. So I can laugh about it now because, you know, in the big picture, but my husband's face, like his shock and kind of anger, but helplessness, like he was like, oh my God, whoa. Yeah. So yeah, he didn't make any conducting mistakes, which was good. So, you know, afterwards, but so yeah, we can both laugh about it now.
In the moment, sometimes it feels so horrible, but yeah, it's like, it's funny after the fact. You think you went through this thing and everybody survived. And, you know, I always think about the audience, like so many things about the audience, but you know, a good majority of them don't know enough about music to even know that you made a mistake, you know. So if you're playing big, I like the way you said that. I was playing big. It's like, if you just own it, you know, they may not even know that you made the mistake. Be like, I've been, you know, if there's no flutes in whatever we're performing, I'll go into the audience and watch my colleagues play. And James Ennis was performing this beautiful violin concerto, and like there was literally people around me snoring like they were fast asleep. So you just don't know, you know, we put so much pressure. It's like we made this huge mistake and it's the end of the world, and like I know better than this, and like you said, I don't know what happened, because you don't. It's like what happened is that you're human and you made a mistake, like we do all the time, right? And so I try to forgive myself in that way, just like, you know, I bet most people wouldn't even have a clue. And even if they did, you know, it's not like they're going to be telling this story to their did you remember when that flutist made that horrible mistake, you know?
I did play in church, I guess. I was quite young, like maybe 11 or 12. And the music just went and just flew off my stand. And, you know, 11, like as 11-year-old, I didn't care. I just got the music and put it back on and just kept going. So ever since then, I've made sure that my music doesn't fall off. But I do remember there being spit in my flute. So I'm fingering a C and a B comes out because all the spit is in the B key. And that's not where I had empathy. A colleague didn't believe me that there was spit in the key and just thought I had played the wrong note. So that was a very judgy time. But I had my deflective shields up, so it didn't really get in. I was just like, isn't that interesting? That's a little judgy. And so I decided, with some wisdom, not to let that judgy comment in. But there are lots of judgy comments that get in. Don't worry about that. I wish I was armored up all the time.
I had a pad that ripped during a backstage performance. We're a pit band, and pad ripped. And this one time I didn't bring an extra flute because I was playing alto, flute, piccolo, recorder. And during the show, someone had to run to my house and pick up my backup flute. And it was so like, and that was the same show that actually the fire alarm went off, and we were backstage. I had all these instruments. I'm like, which one do I pick? And I had 2 kids in the show, and it's like, which one do I pick? I was like, it was panic. It was absolute panic. And we had to evacuate the building, and we weren't sitting in a safe place. So we actually, the emergency door was completely blocked. So we had to wait for the whole cast to go outside first. I was trying to locate my kids, choosing my instruments, and had to run out the back door. And it was set off not by fire, but by, you know, how they put the smoke machine and all that for special effects. So that's what actually set it off. But what a panic that was. And I don't know, maybe Gerry has some similar, I take it you do a lot of pit work and stuff like that. Maybe you've had some moments that have happened like that. We also had a moment where we had a pianist have a seizure during the concert. And so down she went. We're in a different pit, and the door is only about 3.5 feet high to get in and out. And it's like a ladder that you climb up. We had to have the paramedics had to come and try and get this fairly large accompanist out. And we were stuck as well. And from then on, like I went and I said, can we please have a ladder to get out the front of the stage so that if we need to get out, because no way we can all get out that tiny door. So a lot of safety issues, that we've learned from these not funny and some of them funny situations. But yeah, that's been a big cause for panic for me at times when we've been put in situations where there's no way out. So
I was doing like a small version of A Mall in the Night Visitors with Opera Cologne. It was just Leslie Dello on the piano and me on the flute. And they have the exit, and I'm playing along this flute solo, and they just kill the lights. So I had to say to them, so next show, so I'm like, I hope I remember this. I really hope I remember this. But yeah, I think there was there was a couple of things, but at that point it was just like, whatever. I've had so many little minor things happen. I think once we were standing up and somebody had done a big concerto. I was holding my flute in this hand. I started clapping with this hand, and my foot joint fell, crashed to the ground. And I was just like, screamed. Just everybody around me is like, so that was fun. Another time I was in the middle, I don't even know what we were playing. I was playing the solo, and my colleague next to me just stood up and left the stage. And I knew the next movement again was the beginning. That was a 32 bar piccolo solo, and I'm like, uh-oh. So I'm just trying to play. I have no idea. I don't even know if I made a mistake on my solo because I was so concerned about how we were going to start the next one. And it turned out it was one of those shows where we had to wear fancy dresses, and her sequence on her dress had got caught. She was wearing my piccolo on the springs of my piccolo and come out. So she snuck backstage. Luckily, didn't have her piccolo on stage. Grabbed her piccolo, came down, and sat in perfect time. It was really quite. It's hilarious now. At the time, I didn't know what we were going to do. There's so many. Another one was an instrument malfunction. It was body malfunction. So we were hired 10 years ago to do a show outside on Canada Day, and it was literally 40 degrees during the day. So it was 35 degrees at night. We had our concert black on, the sweat dripping down. I was playing Morning, Peer Gynt, so just the flute, and it was mic'd, and a fly started crawling across my face. And I'm like, when can I have a hand? When can I have a hand? So I'm pretty sure I got flattered. My flute was sliding down. Yeah.
I have actually a similar memory with a fly, Christine. I was actually playing at one of my good friends' grandmother's funeral, and we were playing outdoors. My husband is a guitar player, so we perform together for all sorts of events around the city. But at this one particular funeral, I went to go take a big breath, in the middle of a piece, and literally like a fly went straight into my mouth. And in that moment, the entire situation I was in completely flew out the window. Like the fact that I was performing at a funeral and that, it was, a special moment for these people. I just started like in the middle of this performance, and like my husband is trying not to laugh. He's like trying to keep playing, and I just like totally lost it, and it took me a minute to kind of get myself back together, but that was quite the moment for everybody, I am sure. Yeah, good times.
I guess one of the fails I could offer to this conversation was not exactly a flute fail, but related to it. Playing Cats, the second woodwind part is flute, clarinet, and bari sax. And I was playing the show, and those shows are always fun but intense because you're doing 8 shows a week for 6 weeks and busy kind of jumping between instruments regularly. And one of the transitions from flute to clarinet, I was a bit hasty, and I didn't pay. It's dark in the pit. We have to mark things like where your stands are and be careful. And I actually hit the top of the flute onto the clarinet and cracked the mouthpiece of my clarinet, which I'd had for 25-ish years. And then it was like unplayable for the rest of the show. So I actually had to play the clarinet parts on bari sax, transposing them in a couple solos and a couple spots that I could sort of do that quickly, which luckily I've been trained enough to work a lot on transpositioning. So it wasn't a huge issue, but it was bari sax instead of clarinet. So that kind of threw the conductor off. But and even worse fail around the bug thing, which isn't flute specific, but I was playing in BC. I think it was an Invermere for a jazz event. And I learned the hard way that if you ever leave a beer out and you're somewhere in the middle of winter or summer, sorry, wasps will climb into that. And I went and took a swig after I played a solo and literally inhaled like 4 or 5 wasps and got bit at least 3 or 4 times in moments, and then had 2 more hours of music to play. After that, when my tongue and my mouth was swollen up and all weird, and I was playing sax. I quite often I'll bring a tenor and a flute, and sometimes a soprano sax or another instrument, 2 or 3, to mix up the sound. And anyway, couldn't play any flute because my mouth was not working. Could barely play sax, and I think that's the biggest challenge for me that I always try to work for, is like, how do you get the embouchure and transition between instruments when you have 3 minutes, or sorry, 3 bars to change, or short little transitions. And so lots of fails, I can tell you, between situations where you go to play the next instrument and like, nope, or something's going to happen, and particularly when dealing with transitioning from, say, a sax or a clarinet to flute.
Sarah, I don't know if you remember, something had gone on with my flute. We were playing in Grace Presbyterian, and Sarah Geik was playing piccolo or something, and I could be making all of this up. But she had her flute out, so she gave me her flute to play the second flute part. But she had it adjusted differently than I was used to, and I kind of screamed a little bit when I put the flute up to my face. It was like, ah! It was different. I get very, very intensely focused. It's like the only way I can corral my brain is with intensity, it seems. I'm experimenting with some other ways. And so we had a colleague who liked, when he was leaving stage, to just stomp on our riser as he was exiting the stage. And every single time, ah! I'd scream again. Or if he'd put his hand on my shoulder, and I'm not expecting it, I'm so intense, ah! Scream again. So it became quite the shtick and the CPO, because it doesn't take much to make me jump.
Because there was a time that my instrument malfunctioned. I can't, same thing, a key stopped working, or there was some grime in it. And yeah, every time I tried to play a B flat would come out. And it was fairly early on. And, I was still feeling pressure to do well. And you knew what was happening, and you were playing piccolo. So you just handed me your flute, same thing, like to play. Yeah, you don't even remember. And it's interesting because that's, after playing your flute for like 20 minutes, I was like, oh my God, my flute is such a pile of junk that that's why I bought a new flute. After that experience. It's like, oh, it's not me, it's the flute. Oh, okay, God.
Oh, that's very funny, because I play with inline. And so I think that was probably whoa, but you didn't screech with the inline flute.
I try not to screech too much, then.
Well, there has to be someone who doesn't.
Yeah, someone quiet around.
Yeah, recently through my degree process, which had all sorts of things I wasn't expecting, mostly the online classes, and dealing with doing presentations in a Zoom way. It's funny, I don't love public speaking, but I'm quite happy to talk about things that I know something about. But somehow when it was on Zoom, it's you just don't get that same kind of feedback in the moment, and it's so I was in a music and gender class, and my project was about the relatively fewer numbers of female principal flutes in like the big 5, big orchestras, like mostly in the United States. Canada seems to be doing better. So part of it was explaining, what is required in an audition. And I think I was just going to demonstrate a bit of the opening of the Daphnis solo, which, we all have to learn. And I like playing it when it's not for an audition. And my Bo Peep had shifted, and I hadn't noticed, and my first finger, it got in the way. And I didn't have the presence of mind, I guess, because I was on Zoom, to realize that was what was going on. So I was like, oh, something's wrong with my flute. And I'm thinking, they're going to think I just can't play. But I reached for my backup flute and was fine. But, it was just sort of embarrassing. Instrument malfunction, which I don't know why that hadn't happened before, but there you go. It wasn't even a big deal. Like, it wasn't that I needed to send my flute off for overhaul or anything. It was just a silly thing. So, yeah. But so I think situation sometimes changes how reactive or how we react to what's going on. I think it's a biggie. Like worrying about your kids in a fire alarm.
I do want to tell 2 flute retreat recital stories that bring me great joy. So Lorna and I were playing a duet by Simon, and we had organized a few little shtick things, because with the flute retreats, like every year we had to do something more and more silly. So like the bar just kept getting raised, and this was the 150th centennial, and we were playing Arthur Bachman's piece as well as the Simon piece. And so I had found these Canadian boas. And there's this huge piano solo in the middle. And so Lorna and I had organized that we were going to leave and then come back with our boas, put a boa on Roger. And then we found a cowbell in our rental home. So then we started ringing the cowbell, and no one knew we were going to do that. And then, we started playing, and we were both laughing so hard, like we missed part of our cadenza. And so that was like really restorative, because I think there's a skill set to laughing and playing, just like crying and playing. Like, oh, everything's going to get very narrow because I don't have access to my lungs anymore. And then like there was sort of like some improv dancing going on as well. And it just brought so much joy just to remember that experience, and just all the improv, back and forth, like just really paying attention that way of how silly can we be and still play the notes on the page, which was always a challenge with them, because they would just rewrite the music like the morning of. It's like, oh, I can't do that. I'm so tired. Like, and I remember like I would bring Scotch tape with me, because I knew they were going to write something new the day of the performance, and I was going to have to write it out and copy and paste things so that I could at least see what was going on. I mean, they're on such a different level that they come up with all of these things. I guess the other one was with WIBB. Lauren and I were playing Sarasate in duet, and we'd done that for a recording and on a few concerts. And we didn't know that he had snuck beside Roger with his piccolo, and he just started playing like an improv piccolo line on top of Sarasate. You can see in the video, again, just laughing while we're playing. Like, this was just so outrageous. Oh, I miss him very, very much. That was one of my favorite WIBB stories. And how much joy, is available on like the elite of the elite level of playing and genius. It's so I really appreciate, Sarah, that you're doing this and bringing that forward. That most of the great artists we met do have a sense of humor, if they've dealt with their ego. That, I guess, could be a big if.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can perform in such a musical and exciting way if you are just a robot. So I think that's part of, no risk, no reward. And sometimes, the pit that you fall in is huge, but it's just part of, it's just part of it. And like you said, I'm sure all of those players, WIBB included, have made some just horrendous mistakes in their life too, Yeah, for me, it's Nutcracker. We perform Nutcracker like 10 to 12 times every single year. And I still have yet to play it without making a mistake. I don't even know how that's humanly possible, but the more I try to not make a mistake, the more mistakes I make. But yeah, they're so funny to me because none of them are from lack of practice. Certainly, I can probably play the thing by memory by now. And some of the mistakes are like one time I finished the Waltz of the Flowers, dun 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 dun. I was like, dun, bop, bop, bop. Like 4 of the notes were wrong. And then, so of course, it was Sarah McDonald playing with me, and of course, so she bursts out laughing because it was so bad. Then we couldn't even play the next number because we're both just like laughing so hard. And then it's not the most professional move to just be laughing instead of playing, for sure. Sometimes you can't.
I feel like there's always like an off concert portion that is kind of the wrap up of the concert where we relive some of those moments that happened, and it's always the way to kind of let it all out without feeling pressured or embarrassed. We once had a violist who managed to throw his bow into the audience I don't know how that happened, but he actually hit an audience member with his bow, and we had to stop, and he had to go down the staircase off the stage and collect his bow. So that was, at the time it was, everybody just kind of looked down and no one looked at each other. But after the concert was the time when we enjoyed that little incident. And we had a cellist who left his end pin out, and he didn't remember he had, and he tripped over his own cello. And while he was getting back on stage to get ready, and the audience was filing back in, and what a horrendous sound that is. And everybody just kind of jumped, and he was like, oh, no problem, no problem. But, it was another one of those moments that we relived after the concert, and it was fun.
Well, that's the end of our episode for today. Thanks again to all the participants of Flute Tapestry for sharing their stories, some funny, some vulnerable, and just taking the time to talk about failures. If you have any questions or comments about any of our episodes, or have some funny stories you want to reach out and share, please feel free to contact us. You can find us at gbflutes.com.